there, good afternoon. Welcome back to Celtic World Order podcast. As always, I'm your host, Steve O'Matt, and I'm joined by, as you can see, the bold Stevie Woods. I am of the understanding that Paddy Boy may be joining us sometime soon, but for the time being, it's the two of us. A wee bit of an impromptu, sort of early afternoon one. We've got a game around the corner, of course, against Dundee United. We are desperately awaiting a signing of sorts, particularly a striker, 9 days into the transfer window, as Martin Neill has come out and spoke in his press conference about the requirement that they are working. We've heard that, but maybe you believe the words of someone like Martin Neill a wee bit more when he said that a lot of work has been done. Regardless, there's still nothing, and as it says there in the tagline, we need less rumours, less newspaper talk, more action, because at this urgent point of the season, at this absolute crucial sort of crossroads that we're at, it's safe to say, state the obvious, that Celtic need bodies in the door fast. So with one eye on the game against Dundee United, which we will talk about, we're also going to talk a wee bit about the current state or lack thereof of what it is that we call a transfer window for Celtic. So Stevie boy, before we get on about it, good to have you here. And are you as frustrated as probably all these beautiful people in there, the comments are?
Yeah, absolutely. We've come from the absolute ecstasy of having Martin back. We were all on a high for probably about 24, 48 hours. Looking at the official Facebook page of the club today, you can see the players training at Lennoxtown, and it's cheesy grins all over their face. You can see what it means for them to have, Martin and probably, the majority of the coaches back as well. So yes, in terms of that side of things, we're all on the up. Tomorrow is definitely the kind of the start of the season as far as the majority of the fan base are concerned. We can't do anything about where we are at this point, but what we can do is focus on, our last remaining 18 or 19 games and see where we go. That tempered on the other side, of course, as I'm sure everybody else is. We're back to the humdrum of watching the Sky Sports transfer page and just hoping, keeping the fingers crossed that at some point our club badge is going to appear on there, and there's going to be a kind of announcement that there is a deal that has managed to get over the line.
Well, absolutely. And we'll talk about it. And I know they're starting to filter in there, but in 50 years or so, join us as they come in. Let us know your thoughts on it. What is the frustrations of these supposed links, which we'll get on? Many seem to have sort of simmered down very quickly and even rubbish, shall we say. What's your thoughts on this? Is this just indicative of where Celtic are, where we are theoretically looking back to try and move forward, or we're just simply not getting the job done, such as the way that Celtic always seem to do their business? Before we do that, just want a wee shout out to everybody who's joined us, particularly Dan. Thank you very much to Dan the man. Indeed, he is the man, and he has gifted 10 of you other lovely people out there a Celtic World Order podcast membership. As we say, if you want to get involved in that, thank you very much. You can do. It's $1.99. It's a wee donation, just helps with all the overheads. And Dan has squared up 10 of you, so lovely. Thank you very much. We really appreciate that. But most importantly, hit the subscribe, because it costs you absolutely hee-haw, which is the same as what Celtic seem to be doing the transfer window. Hee-haw, costs you nothing. Get yourself subscribed up and get notified. Hit the big thumb if you like it. And as always, down below, all the other media links for ourselves. So let's get down to business. Let's just go straight in to this transfer talk, if you will. Rumour and innuendo, as I like to say. And we'll jump off with what Punch is saying. And he says, Kyogo not signed. It's a disgrace that absolutely, down the year, that we still haven't been replaced. And Celtic's option here appears to be, don't replace Kyogo. Replace Kyogo with Kyogo potentially a year down the line. Don't replace Jota. Wait until Jota comes up. Replace Jota with Jota. Don't replace Brendan Rodgers. Replace Brendan Rodgers with Brendan Rodgers. You know it all by now. That's the way they kind of do it. We just seem to get around in cycles. And as he says, we're not going to flog the dead horse. We all know who's to blame. I have my theories on that there might be, Steve-O, dumping of Nicholson. Probably not right now, but further down the line. So it came out that Kyogo was linked with potentially a loan move to Celtic. Then there was also the chitter chatter that with the interest previously of Yang, that he could maybe be used as some sort of bargaining chip, some sort of mate in it. And the response was quite largely fairly positive. Folk went, you know what? And maybe again, it's an indictment of where we are. It's better than what we've got. But where were you at it with this Kyogo rumour, mate?
Well, just going back, since Kyogo was sold, questions need to be asked about what the hell was Paul Tisdale doing.
Yes.
Surely at that point, he should have been locked in a room with an Excel spreadsheet and said,
And an Excel bully?
no, that would be harsh on the bully. He should have been locked in there and said, you're not coming out until you provide some sort of database of short-term, guys who are at the end of their contract this coming season. A list of players who you think might be longer-term targets. Project players along with that as well.
Mm-hmm.
I find it absolutely incredible. I'm not even believing this, that we as a club in the whole of world football, we cannot get a striker that is interested in coming to play for us. I do not understand how that is possible. A lot of talk in the last few days about Callum Wilson. His position at West Ham, they've obviously done transfer business and brought in 2 new younger strikers. So I'm just using Callum as an example. Here's a guy who, if you think that if I looked at his stats before I come on, and I think he's been involved in 18 games this season. Now, 18 games in the Premiership is not to be sniffed at. Mm-hmm. Scored 4 goals, fair enough, so he knows where the back of the net is. Why you wouldn't be knocking at his door and saying, we want you here for the last 6 months of the season. Possibly we will negotiate an additional year's extension onto the top of that, because 34, if he thinks he's fit enough to go an extra season, he might not want to move his family up here just for 6 months, but he might think about it if it's 18 months. But that's the sort of player. If you go on to Google or any place else, you could find these guys who, as I say, either coming up to the end of their deal at the end of the season. You could be looking at guys who we spoke about on the last podcast that I did, guys who have potential of going to the World Cup and maybe want to come here. Maybe they're not getting a lot of playing time with the teams that they're involved in at the moment, and you think, come here, play, as many minutes as your performances give you. Try and get your minutes and your goals and your performance, and that'll put into your international manager a wee thought in the back of his head to say, all right, well, now I've seen him get more minutes and see what his performances are like. He's now given me a wee thought for, what happens when we get up to the World Cup. So there's various avenues in this. I say, over the last year, how has Paul Tisdale not left behind at least some sort of documentation that says, here's where we are, here's potential transfers. Every manager, of course, you turn around and you say, oh, I don't fancy him or I don't fancy him. That's fine. But at least you've got that list to work your way through and say, right, okay, here's the options here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. This is, as I said, is indicative of what Celtic do. We tend to look back to what's previously worked and try to hope that that's going to suddenly, strike lightning twice. The prime example that I always use was when we signed Barkas. Now, a lot of you will know, some may not know, that actually he was Barkas once upon a time during the first stint of Brendan Rodgers, was actually a goalkeeper that was profiled at that time. And I know this, we don't pretend to be in the know, but I do know this is it's been a fact. And he was one that, when it came round to requiring a goalkeeper, many seasons down the line, we revisited what we'd already looked at without probably again having a look at it. It's kind of a wee bit like liking the look at a motor 7 years ago, and then the same motor pops up and you go back to it, but you don't actually look under the bonnet to see how it's been running. That seems to be what Celtic do. And there's a lot of people are saying here, as you've just said, what's Tisdale been doing? He's been in the job for, prior to getting sacked, of course, a fairly substantial period of time, during which you'd think that we'd have a plethora, multiple targets where you've got your first and your fallback, and there would be something in place, much to the tune that when that transfer window opened, whether it was him, whether it was someone else, or it was Maloney, I believe, is going to be doing it all right at the moment, that there was something there that Celtic would be able to start pulling the trigger on targets. Now, I understand that perhaps any would-be targets might have been geared towards Wilfred Nancy being in the door, right?
Yeah.
And maybe the fact that it's maybe been players tailored to a particular style, that they've maybe pumped the brakes on it and don't want to go there. But nonetheless, even before that, mate, even before the window opened, tell me right now, how many genuine rumours or names did you actually hear prior to this window opening, prior to Nancy getting the sack? Because I couldn't tell you is the honest answer, mate. Really couldn't tell you.
Well, if I kind of on a daily basis, I have a wee look at the BBC website, and they have under their football section, they have a wee kind of gossip column, and on a daily basis, you get names thrown in for all the teams. But there weren't actually that many. Muntianu was one that popped up again after, as we say hello to Paddy Boy. Hail, Paddy. Muntianu was a kind of name that popped up, and then a couple of weeks later popped up, more around how his value was decreasing. Hector and Lanzarote, thanks very much, Hector. I'm very jealous. If you find,
I'm just going to throw
any players on the bench,
I'll throw that in. I've got March lined up for that. Yes.
Yeah. If Hector, if you see any guys kicking a ball about on the beach, and you think they might be decent, they know where the back of the net is, then pop them on an EasyJet flight and get them across in time for tomorrow. In terms of overall numbers of players that we have been linked with this season, it's been sparse. Really, there's not that many that have been touted. Celtic are looking at him. Celtic are looking at him. Yeah, it's been more focused on the manager turnaround. From Brendan as well as from Wilfred. That's what's taken up our focus this season, rather than the players that seem to have been put on the back burner to the detriment of the team as we sit in the table now.
Yeah, absolutely. Paddy, welcome into the chat, mate. Yes, I would say we're talking all things Celtic transfers, but they are, as it says there, it's just rumours, mate. Rumour and innuendo, paper talk, agent talk, shit pot stirring, whatever you want to call it. It's typical Celtic transfer window Groundhog Day, where we've nothing actually genuinely tangible, it seems. We've mentioned briefly the Kyogo situation. A guy who is well familiar to us. He had an absolutely disastrous failed loan, not lots of permanent move to Rennes. A lot said that they didn't want to get rid of him at the time, but I suppose given his age and 10 million, you couldn't have turned your nose up to that. It was a disaster possibly went down, or one will go down as one of Ren's worst signings ever, I'd imagine. He then makes his way to Birmingham. The fans seem to like him, but he does absolutely nothing. It's as if he took that inability to score goals at Birmingham and it's just taking it down there. Celtic, and taking it down there to Birmingham with him. I believe it's about 23 games this season, absolutely no goals. And that good faith of all the effort and likeable personality is wearing off with him now. We were obviously linked with him. The argument would be it's better than what you've got. It's a step back, but again, rocking a hard place. It might be better than you've got. But now we're hearing, I've heard from Birmingham's manager, a very familiar Birmingham manager, of course, up at Celtic before, saying that he's the understanding that he wants to stick about, he wants to fight for his place, and he expects him to pick it up. Martin Neill's come out and been asked about it. He's used the term very unlikely, despite all these rumours and in the wars that said, look at this, he's signing, blah, 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 blah. I just want your thoughts on it, Paddy. Firstly, the Kyogo and where the Celtic pivot, because another name that's been coming up is, of course, Mr. Wilson, who looks as if he's going to be released for West Ham.
Mm-hmm. On that, listen, good to be back, guys. You know how I like to make an entrance and all that. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, the kind of Kyogo thing, mate. It's just it's kind of leaving a wee sour taste in my mouth. Right, we got rid of Kieran Tierney, we never replaced him, so we brought back Kieran Tierney. Yep. We got rid of Jota, we never really replaced him, so we brought back Jota. We got rid of Kyogo, we never really replaced him, so we're going to bring back Kyogo. That's the way it seems now. Who's next? Nicholas Kuhn. Do you know what I mean? Who? Listen, we'd probably take Nicholas Kuhn at the minute. You never know, mate. It's just
Gary Hooper.
Aye, honestly, it's absolutely brutal at the minute. I don't want Kyogo to come back, mate. I don't think he's the answer to what we've done, to what we need at the minute. I think he's he done well for us. He was a very good striker when he was at Celtic, and he got his move, jumped at it. We made our money from him, and I think now's the time to draw a line under that. It's rumour mill, mate. It's been everywhere. I've been getting sent links that it's already done, the paperwork's already signed, and everything's already happening and stuff like that. But you know what, mate? I hope it's wrong, because there are other better strikers out there, and it just epitomises Celtic's transfer window for me, or the window we should just call it, because there doesn't seem to be much transfer happening.
Absolutely,
it's brutal, and if we can't identify that there are other strikers out there. Now, I don't know off the top of my head how many strikers there are in the world, mate, but there's bound to be other ones that haven't played for Celtic. Let's be honest.
Absolutely. Who's the one with the squeaky door?
I don't know, it's no name. A lot of people saying big Giakoumakis as well. Bring in Giakoumakis, bring back this guy, bring back that guy. I don't want to go back for the same reason that I didn't want to go back to Big Ange, for the same reason that I didn't really want to step back. Yes, we stepped back to bring in Martin Neill, but that was to steady the ship and get it going until we get a decent manager in place. The best option for me at this minute in time, Steve-O, has got to be your man Bowie for Hibs. Somebody on TikTok as well that obviously mentioned that. I'd take somebody like that in a heartbeat.
I think it's key right now. What I would say is key, and Stevie and I were discussing, and that's where the name Callum Wilson comes in. Listen, I'm not going to sit here and lie to you, right? I'm not going to say that I am bowled over by any of the apparent links, bar for example, maybe Nico Segur, who we'll go on to, I think, looks more like the way we should be after, right? But if anything that I've heard, nothing's bowling me over and going, wow, that's exactly what we need. But Callum Wilson came up, I asked you about him. And I think, as Steve-O pointed out, he's about 18 out and scored, I think, about 5 goals. I think one, maybe 2 assists or something, his name, right? It is what it is. He's 33, he's getting on, but he has been playing, and we know he's got concerns around his injury, as did Iheanacho, and still does, obviously. But by and large, he's been playing, right? And he's playing at a decent level. And even no matter how the goals come, getting a tally of that at West Ham at this moment in time is pretty decent considering where they are. And as I've said a million times, in England, with these sort of provincial clubs, scoring 5, 6, 7 goals is considered a good season for most guys. So if you could get somebody in like that, who they're going to tear up the contract, I think absolutely go for it. But I totally agree with you. Celtic need to supplement it. This isn't a one and done striker situation. This is easily 2 strikers and potentially another attacking player who is versatile enough that if you get really desperate that you could utilise a striker, because we still don't know what's going to happen with Maeda. We obviously seen the sort of Wolfsburg talk, and then all that didn't happen and all that kept for Martin Neill, so we don't know if that could be revisited. We've obviously got the Yang situation. Again, I know he's a winger, but you never know where he's going to go. So in typical Celtic fashion, there's not been much talk around about folk leaving the club, but ultimately we get our resolve tested right at the last minute. So we need to get guys in, and I wouldn't be against the likes of exploring about, or as myself and Steve-O said the last time we were on, even guys, I know it's short-termism, but like a Martin Boyle or somebody that you could maybe get in. There needs to be at least two bodies, preferably somebody with a bit of experience and somebody that's a wee bit younger. So I wouldn't be against that. But
see, when you're talking about it, Steve-O, guys like Wilson remind me kind of, I know it's somebody from across the city, but like a Jermaine Defoe, he'll come up here and he'll do a job.
Aye, exactly, mate.
We're linked to guys like Vardy when you think about it as well. And these guys can come in. Yes, they'll come in, they'll do a job, they'll score 20 goals up here, but they're not going to be the answer long term. We need somebody in, run about 25 to 27 years old, maybe a wee bit younger, somebody that's playing really well at this moment in time. And these guys are all fine and well. They're coming to the end of their career down south. They're not really getting much game time. They're kind of sitting in the periphery of these teams. They're not doing too much. I've seen Mikel Antonio was linked as well, another one that was banging him in for West Ham.
Arigi's also, that name's floated about, but
yeah,
Arigi,
again, brilliant for Liverpool, but are you want to bring these guys in just for a name, really? That's all it is to me. Talking about guys like Maeda and stuff as well, Steve-O, I think we've got a good chance of holding on to Maeda, especially with the World Cup coming up, because he's obviously wanting to push for his place in the World Cup squad for Japan. So I think holding on to these guys and saying, listen, you want to push, if you want to go, you can go by all accounts, but if you stay here, there's a good chance and a good opportunity that you may progress and actually push on and get into your actual squad. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. Just to finish off on the Kyogo before we move on to some of the other stuff, this idea that he wants to stick about and whatever, I would say definitely, as you says, don't look back. I just want to finalise with yourself, Stephen, what you think. See this idea that if you have to convince somebody, then for me, if you have to convince somebody, particularly somebody who's been here, who has been something of a hero, knows exactly what to expect and how you can be treated, if you need to reconvince them to come here, then for me, I say you move on at the earliest possible juncture and get it in the bin. I don't mean this out of spiteful, I don't mean this to be nasty, but see if your plan, Kyogo, is to remain at Birmingham and score fuck all goals all season and win nothing, that's fine, mate. Knock yourself out. If that's really what you want to do, I understand you've went there, it's not worked out, you want to prove yourself. But if you need another half a season to do loads of running about and just be that guy that's likeable and absolutely no chance whatsoever of going to a World Cup, then that's fine. So are you pretty much on board with that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's why Maeda kind of put the brakes on the request for the move away. He got to a stage in the season where he's thinking, I'm a regular starter up here because of the injuries and other things. I know his form hasn't been great, but he looked at that and says, I am starting more games than I'm starting on the bench. If I go to any other club, especially, halfway through a season, I'm not going to be a guaranteed starter there. And if I'm suddenly on the bench, then the Japanese manager is going to be looking at that and saying, well, if you're not playing, you're not going to be in my thoughts for starting World Cup games. If you're at Celtic and you're starting, as I say, even though his form hasn't been what it was last season, he's still starting and he's getting those minutes under his belt. So yes, the mentality for Maeda is play until it gets to the World Cup. If you move, you're taking that absolute gamble. Going back to Paddy's point, yes, absolutely. We need to be looking at longer term prospects to bring in. My priority, purely my opinion here, guys, is we have 6 months in which to get ourselves back to the top of the league, to get a league win and to make sure that we are in the mix for next year's Champions League. If we, at the moment, don't bring in a striker, whether that's a short-term loan or, just someday, if we miss out on the league this year, we miss out on the finances, we miss out on so much that we can then use to build in the summer. Yeah. So as I say, that's why I totally get Paddy's point. We want somebody who's younger and who's going to be with this club, for 2-3 years. Absolutely fine. But as I say, if a 6-month loan deal for Callum Wilson, he's a good physical player, which we've kind of talked about in previous podcasts. He ticks the boxes in terms of what we're looking for as a striker under Martin Neill. Somebody who will use his body and won't be knocked off the ball the way some of our younger players are at the moment. So I definitely think there is room to say we need to get somebody in, whether that's 6 months loan, don't care. We want somebody who's coming in and being our striker at the moment. Yes, we've got Ian Atchell coming back from injury. We've got Callum Osman who's coming back from injury. I know that's still a few weeks away, but I would like to see more of him before the end of the season. Yeah. And then, as I say, concentrate on getting ourselves back to the top of the league so that by the end of the season, we know we've got Champions League money, whether we've got to play a qualifier or not. But we want to be in that. So we've got a very, very short time scale to get ourselves back, on top of the league. So I do take Paddy's point. Yes, we want a Josh Mulligan, not Josh Mulligan, Josh Mulligan, Evan Ferguson or something like that. Sorry, who's younger, and you think, he's going to be here 2, 3, possibly 4 seasons or whatever. But I think we're on dangerous ground now where we need to bring in somebody that is going to get us, results in the shorter term.
So, absolutely. I mean, you spoke about physicality there. Now, we could talk about the requirement for a striker. It's the huge elephant in the room, the one that everybody's absolutely fuming about, completely bailing about in frustration, because the reality is, with Ian Atchell out, maybe up to 2 weeks out, if you believe what Martin Neill was sort of suggesting there. But then again, that's 2 weeks just to get yourself together. It doesn't mean ready to go and start and play and contribute for any length of time. So you're maybe looking at least 4 weeks minimum before you can sort of play him more regularly and harder, but then no guarantees with that. So the striker is undoubtedly something that needs fire to its sweep, because we're getting this game at the weekend. I probably would imagine that you might find that with Taneki back, they would be inclined to put Maeda through the middle. But as some folk are saying, maybe, just maybe, Johnny Kenny, for I don't know why, for some reason, would suddenly be better. But it's concerning that's what we go in at that sort of crucial point as. But in terms of something that you said that we need is physicality. The only other name that's came about, other than the Tabi, we'll get on to, is of course Nico Segur, who I've got here. And reports at first were saying, Celtic were interested in him prior to Nancy being sacked. That made us pump the brakes a wee bit. Then there was the reports that seemed a wee bit well off the mark, that Celtic have beat off the competition, they're going to get him in, so on and so forth. Now, playing at Hajduk Split, as we'll know, and, defensive midfielder, folk were leaning on this. He's a right back, he's versatile, but he's pretty much that, looks like it could be that combative number 6 that we've got, right? Give us a wee bit of grit, wee bit of sort of fight that we're sorely lacking. Again, look at his profile in there, 120 games, for what it's worth, 7 goals, 6 assists. This is one that, despite us obviously being overrun in the midfield, I think this is definitely the kind of player, of the very few and scant rumours that we've had, Paddy, that I would definitely be interested in getting in. I think it's fair to say that, Engels has been hot and cold. Hatate looks as if he's completely chucked it. Again, all these guys might just have new life breathed into them with Martin Neill's return, but remains to be seen. I'm just looking at face value, and of course, I think I wouldn't be surprised if Celtic even offloaded a Bernardo in this January window at some point, because it looks like his tease out. Is this the kind of thing that you think that Celtic need? We know we need a striker, there's no point in saying it again, but if we're looking elsewhere on the pitch, somebody that can cover at right back, but can also do the dirty work in the midfield.
Well, we need players that are versatile, Steve. Let's be honest. We need players that are going to come in and do a job either way. I think if we are going to offload some of our midfield players that are in there, like you said, guys like Bernardo, maybe even, McCown will be in there, let's be honest. Hatate's obviously been linked with moves away and whatever. I seen, was it Fan 1967 there saying that it looks good on YouTube, but then again, who doesn't? It's that old cliche, isn't it? You see something on YouTube and you go, oh my God, like I watched Balakwisha, mate, and I was convinced that we were getting an absolute baller. How fucking wrong was I? Let's be honest. So yeah, you can watch these YouTube videos and go, oh, this guy looks great. But at the end of the day, we've got to take it on the kind of stats wise and kind of roughly where he's playing at, what style of league he's playing, and what style of team he's playing in. Has he had international caps? Has he been capped for Croatia? Again,
I'll need to double check it. I think no, he's not Croatian, mate. He's Canadian.
Oh, so he's Canadian. Sorry.
He's just, easy to think because I know Nico Segura. You think that, aye, but no, he's a Canadian.
So again, you kind of need to look at that kind of style. Is he going to be up to playing for Celtic, having the expectation of winning every single week? Is he someone who's got a wee bit about him? Because playing in that, like you said, the number 6 role, essentially, that kind of Callum McGregor role, or sitting just in front of Callum, roughly where Arnie Engels would be, it's a tough role to play. And if he's used to playing on that right-hand side, then it might actually help us out. If we've got guys like Alistair Johnston out and we're relying on our midfielders to actually track back and do a bit of work. So again, yes, but I agree with what you're saying as well there, Steve-O. Yeah. There are other positions that I would rather see before I see a defensive midfielder in. And I think that's...
See with this here, I agree fully. But I think Celtic need multiple things if we're going to push on and we're going to be successful this season.
Can I just jump in there, Steve? See where you've got the guy's stats up. Does it show you who his agent is?
Well, no, it's actually Callum McGregor's agent. So
exactly.
There we go.
That I did see that screen you were looking at earlier in the week. And yeah, Callum McGregor's agent. So, and there was
I could actually see on this, right?
Juranovic's agent and
sorry, I spoke to you, Steve, and I'd said obviously I'd spoken to John Kennedy, right? And wished him well in his new endeavour with Brendan and stuff like that. And he got back to me and we did a bit of back and forth, a bit of chat. And I kind of off the cuff asked him, "Are you going to be stealing any of our players?" And he said, "Haha, like a captain, LOL." And I said, "Yes, definitely like a captain." What? And he just he said, "Not at the minute, but stranger things have happened." And I thought, you know what, mate? It's not a no, but it wasn't a resounding yes. And I think he would have maybe given us a heads up if he was actually interested. Do you know what I mean? I think
to jump in on that, I'll be honest with you, that's something that, you know, maybe sort of sensationalism and funny, and folk might run with that and take it a different way. I think, to be honest with you, I think despite the ups and downs of this season, Callum McGregor's reputation will be absolutely torched if he left Celtic. Scott's their stuff, so it's no happening. I'd say that right now. But to throw back to yourself, Stephen, people are saying in the comments here, we're talking about Nico Segura, and Ben, you've essentially described Josh Mulligan at Hibs, right?
Yeah.
Now, I get that, and I would be all over that. I don't know why Celtic aren't all over that. You know, as we've said before, look at some of the really good combative midfielders that we've got. You only talk to Scott Brown as well for there. You know, if you were forced into a corner, mate, and you had to go for one or the other, what would you go with?
Oh, I mean, well, for me at the moment, okay, I don't want to jinx this, but say Callum got an injury and was going to be out for a couple of weeks. Who out of the current squad would you see stepping up to be captain? That's what we're looking for. You know, when we had Bruni here, and then, you know, Calmac was coming through, and you could say there's a kind of natural successor. Different style about him, but you know, knew the club, knew what it meant, and so it was pushing the players to be the absolute best that they could. You know, you get him in that huddle, and you can see what he's like, getting his message across to the players. At the moment, I don't see who the natural successor is to Callum McGregor to take over the captaincy.
If I was forced, then now, like if he was injured and I was forced, I would probably say if fit is a toss-up between Kieran Tierney or Alistair Johnson. That's what I would say, just based on attitude.
It needs to be, like Stephen says there, a player that knows what it means, doesn't it? It needs to be a player that has been at Celtic for a while and understands what it means to be a captain. And I think, you see, like you said, Stephen, you've seen the last game there. I can't remember what one it was. It might have been the Rangers game where it kind of zoomed in to the huddle and you seen Callum in there, and it kind of popped on him. I don't do lip reading or anything like that, but you can see the passion in there. You can see, we do this, we do that. Blah, blah, blah. Do you know what I mean? I thought that's what you need at that time, especially when we were really struggling on and off the pitch, for a captain to get that team in there and go, listen, guys, doesn't matter what's going on around about us. This is where we shine. This is what we have to do. Do you know what I mean? And you need that. And I think somebody like a Kieran Tierney, Steve, like you're saying, might be ideal for that. Or even Luke McCowan, somebody who gets it. Somebody who's been a captain somewhere else.
I'm not getting you Luke McCowan. No having that.
He's done it somewhere else, mate. He's done a fantastic job at Dundee. Do you know what I mean? I'd have somebody in there like that, because let's face it, Kieran Tierney's
but you also need to combine that with ability to be properly good at football. No disrespect to me as a good footballer, but your captain's a guy that you're going to play most of the time, if not every game. Luke McCowan isn't that guy, so by default, it just simply couldn't be him. But I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
But yes, in terms of that, you know, I understand. I think Mulligan's a guy, or Mulligan, the guy who should be all over. Do I see it happening? Typically not, and it'd be the kind of guy he'd move to some other team, maybe go abroad again. So we've seen odds of sort of younger players who over here do. But in terms of the very, as I say, basic rumours that we've got, and the one that looks as if it's going to happen is Jocelyn Tabai. You and I spoke about him, Steve. I think I've mentioned it out to Paddy as well. Again, unpopular choice. And it's because he's coming for Israel. He was on loan at another team, Israel, for his parent club. And this looks as if this is going to be the sort of main one that's done. This might well have been a legacy, Nonce, Tisdale signing. Probably more than likely is potentially something that's been further down the line. There's been nothing firmed up on it yet, Steve-O, but he did make comments which have since been reported, and he says, playing for a club like Celtic, it's a dream come true for me, but without the support and love I received in Israel, I'd not have reached these levels. The decision to come here and the trust I received from the club and my friends to me made me make the progress. I will not forget the period I've here at Hapoel and the love and the warmth surrounded me, right? So if I'm going to fulfill a big dream at a famous club and in one of the best stadiums in the world, right? So it sounds the way he's talking as if this is happening. You spoke before we came on that there's chat that he might be getting round and travelling. Clearly not going to be, if he is going to sign, available for the weekend. We spoke about it, mate. I don't think with his profile, I think it's about 40-odd games, about 6 goals or something like that, which sounds better than it maybe is. I don't think, for me, it justifies the maybe just over £1 million now. For, again, I say this a million times, and I shouldn't have to say it, but just for clarity, my moral compass is absolutely bang on, right? I try to split the two, politics, the background. This is where the guy's played. I don't know how long he's been out there, but that's where he's playing his trade. I am less concerned about where players have came from, as long as they are going to up Celtic's levels. They're going to produce when they're at Celtic, and they're going to make us better. That said, my problem with Tabi is I just think it's file under Taneke, file under Balakwisha, file under even Yangi, what we've seen at the front end of him, where it's another speculative punt that we hope's going to do. And a guy that looks really fast, rapid, may remember that. He looks rapid, quite skillful and tricky, and an average league on YouTube. So,
is he Balakishwa rapid? Is that what we're talking here?
But no, he actually genuinely looks, again, it means nothing. He looks quite nifty. He looks quite sharp. Good proper turn of pace. Looks quite skillful. But that YouTube highlight reel isn't exactly laden with highlights. It's very brief. Do you know what I mean? As we say, you can make anybody look great here. I just think that my problems lie less with where he's coming from and more to do with I just simply don't think he's good enough, mate.
Well, yeah, time will tell. I mean, that's the thing. We've seen guys who come in with a big reputation and don't cut it, and then we see guys who come in that nobody's ever heard of. You're like, who is this guy? Where's he coming from? But they make an impact, and you say, okay, let's judge the guy on what he does on the park. I mentioned Balakishwa there. 18 months of people ranting and raving, this is, we need to get him in, we need to get him in, we need to get him in. First game in a Celtic jersey, and you're like, dug meat, absolute dug meat. So, it's no guarantee where he's coming from, who he is. you're going, let's get him in a jersey first. The main thing is getting him signed.
Yeah. The thing is, mate, I would rather have quality signings rather than just a quantity of signings. Of course, we would.
Totally agree with that.
On this guy to buy, I don't care where he comes from. I don't care if he's been playing in Israel for so long, right? He's an Ivorian international, the guy. And he's been applying his trade out there. Yes, you're going to have to pay an Israeli team to get his services. But if he is a player that's going to strengthen our squad, then I am quite happy to bring him into Celtic. I know there will be a divide. I know there will be people out there who don't agree with paying money to an Israeli team or things like that. But listen, that's on you, pal. If this guy if it's Lionel Messi playing out there and we bring him in and we have to pay an Israeli team to get this guy into the squad, he's going to make us better. Are you going to whinge about it? No, you're not. If we bring this guy in, he hits the ground running and he bangs in 20 goals this season, nobody will give a fuck where he came from. Let's be honest, nobody will care.
What I would say is on that, and listen, we don't want to go down this route because it is very convoluted, it is very divisive, it splits folk. And again, for the benefit of everybody watching, nobody sitting on the screen, nobody associated with Celtic World Order in any way, shape or form approves of what's been happening out in Israel and Palestine, right? And I say this categorically, this is innocent people and children dying on both sides, okay? We don't want to see that. The world in general is a mess everywhere, okay? This is the kind of things that we don't want to see. But again, coming back, if we can try and split the two things and looking at it, I understand the folk are saying we don't want to buy players from Israeli teams, etc. But as Paddy said, and I've said on here before, let's live in a world where Celtic need a striker right now. Let's say this guy was a striker. I know he's not, but we're playing a game of hypotheticals. Celtic need a striker. And he's been playing out in Israel for 5 seasons. And every season he scored 25 goals per season. And he gets offered to Celtic either for £3 or £1 million. Yes, there'll be a million folk that would sit there and say, don't sign that guy. But my standpoint would always be, if the guy comes in, if the guy makes you better, if the guy fills the job you need him to do and performs, that should be paramount. Don't judge a guy based on where they've happened to apply their trade. That's all I would say with it. Do you personally think that this is going to be a potential problem for the guy if he does sign? Because I wouldn't like it to be.
Neill Abada, unfortunately, is the example there. You know, was literally hounded out the club by a certain percentage of our own fan base. You know, that is, you know, you tell me the correlation between him being an Israeli and what was happening elsewhere in the world. That, unfortunately, is the way some people will see it. Mm-hmm. Some will agree with that. Some won't agree with that. I thought he was treated harshly. He had absolutely, you know, it wasn't as if he was coming out with social media messages in support of the war or this, that, the next thing. You know, there has to be a wee bit of divide here in terms of you let the guy live his life, whether it's Neill Abada, whether it's the guy coming in. He's got a right to go about his own business and not be involved in, you know, something that he has no control over. That's for you know, governments to deal with and stuff like that. You know, nobody's saying we shouldn't have American players because of what Donald's doing elsewhere in the world. So, you know, let's just, this is football, this is Celtic. Anybody that comes here is welcome as a player, as a member of staff, whatever. Let's leave politics and everything else to one side, unless, as I say, you start to see people with social media messages and starting to court their own controversy. But no, players are players. They want to come here, do a job for their own career.
Absolutely.
Let them crack on with it.
I'm just on that comment there that's come up, and that's going to be a nice wee segue. We've sat here and we've moaned, we've complained about how Celtic don't do business. Now, again, folk will shout it, we'll see it in the comments, delayed afterwards and everything else, and I'm sure that here, don't talk about them and this and that. Well, let's just talk about them because it is important. People might say, well, you know, it used to be, but we're wanting to shop in Waitrose when they're, you know, in the bargain basement. Celtic ain't shot me anywhere, right? So, as I always say in the running joke, it's a bit like not being able to drive and telling your pal his car's a shanner, right? That's where we're at with it. But the reality is here, we'll look at Hearts. Hearts have went out and they've identified, I believe, 2-3 players. Still waiting personally to see confirmation of it happening, but do due diligence. And with that said, the squad looks in a decent place, so the urgency is a lot less for them. We then look at Rangers, and they have agreed, I believe, fees for 2 guys. When they're going to come in is, neither here nor there, but the fees are about 3.5 for the under-21 Belgian chap, and also a fee around about sort of £3 million for a left back. And again, another fee, £4 million for the boy for Sturm Graz. People are asking about Bowie. Again, Rangers might be just stirring, trying to up his value. Maybe Hibs are looking to get rid of him. But they have approached, or they've sounded out that they are an interested party, right? So there's lots of movement at our 2 key rivals, both 2 teams that are above us, by the way, and getting the job done. So this argument that Celtic are shopping in different markets needs to get straight out the window, does it not, Paddy?
Aye, 100%, mate. I don't know what markets that we're shopping in, or who's bringing in these people now, because obviously Mr. Tisdale, the famous doctor, is out. So who is actually doing our scouting? Who's the person who's identifying these players, right? I'm not a scout, but I watch Scottish football. I watch the Premier League. I've watched a bit of the Championship. I watch European football. I can tell you if a good player's there. I can point somebody out and go, he'd fit into our system really, really well. He'd do well. And I watched that boy Bowie against Hearts in the Edinburgh Derby, mate. He was outstanding. Running off the ball, his vision, his just absolute incredible. He's finishing perfect. And I thought, that's what we need. And if he wants to push and get himself to be the number 1 striker for Scotland in the World Cup, moving to Celtic would do that tenfold, mate. That would push him on big time. And I think that that's something that he would maybe have in the back of his head as well. I think that's something that should be exploited. I think we could get him in for about 3 million. 3-4 million, I don't know.
I've got to jump in, Paddy. I think, again, bearing in mind the tough market that we've got, the hard market, it's tough to get players in January. Well, again, take that as you find it, because, again, no guarantee they're going to be good, but there we go. There's our rivals, and I say rivals, Rangers, right? As I believe what you see there, already teed up deals to the tune of about £10 million for 3 players, and potentially sniffing about Bowie, right? So it's embarrassing. Now, what I would say as to caveat it, bear in mind the absolute clown that they had at the start of the season in Russell Martin, who brought an absolute guff with him, and also the 2 idiots that signed off in them are on the bin. Now, say what you will about Danny Rowe, but I think he looks like a more astute manager than the last guy that's with him. And with the clowns that are out, you've got to err on the side of caution, Stephen, that they might just get it right this time, innit?
Oh, you can't be rotten all the time. That's the thing. We were talking at work, you and I, about looking back over, even if you take probably the last 10 years of Celtic's transfer business. If you look at the number of players, break it down into percentages, how many of the players that we brought in the last 10 years have actually gone on to make an impact in the first team, compared to how many that didn't make any kind of impact and then had to be farmed out elsewhere or sold on. That is the thing. You want to bring in players who, are they better than what we have at the club at the moment? Paddy quite rightly says, I want quality rather than quantity. I totally get that and totally agree with that. But again, there are ones that you think we need to get a wee bit of a punt here, looking at a market that nobody else has really explored, and we might get in. So going back to, where we are, every club will say, the players were brought in X amount, X player not good enough, X player not good enough. See that one that brought in, well, that's a wee diamond. And with Danny Roll now in charge of Rangers, some of those players who pre-Danny Roll were considered not good enough, they're now at least starting to do a better job. I'm not saying that they're suddenly hugely top quality, but they're doing a better job. That's why Rangers now have been clawing back the points as Danny Roll's games have progressed. So he's obviously doing something right. In the same way that Martin came in for the 7 games, points on the board. We said that was what was most important. That's been, Danny's, mentality. I think is get the points on the board. Whether they're losing money that's for them to deal with. You know what I mean? We've seen years and years of it's all been their financial mismanagement that have done them. So that's fine. But
yes,
getting back to us, we need players in. As I say, we need a mix. We can't just go for these are all top quality signings. We need some guys in short-term loans. Guys who, as I say, I'm only looking as far as the next 6 months. You want to look further than that, absolutely fine. But for me, 6 months really, really important to end this season.
It's crucial, and Paddy, that is the thing. Look at it, as you've just said, is brought up there. Our rivals. We say our rivals. We'll get 2 rivals this season because let's be honest, Hearts are right in the mix. But yes, they do. They continually, go to that well of spending money, maybe at their detriment. But here's the reality, right? Here's the reality. At this moment in time, Hearts are an extremely well-run club. They've got the right people in there, and they're trying to be sustainable. They're working through things in the right sort of future planning. They're trying to forward plan, and that will continually get better for season to season to season to season. And so long as the likes of Tony Bloom's around, that will continually improve. Now, can you imagine? Now, they would have to qualify, and the chance of them qualifying for the Champions League just isn't going to happen, right? But can you just imagine for 1 second a world where they were to win the league? What that would do for them financially? That would be huge. They would be gangbusters for them. They'd be absolutely no blockbuster. They would have record revenue streams, right? And then if they could get themselves into a decent spot in Europe, then they would build on it and invest in it. Hate to remind you, Rangers potentially, depending on how Bodo Glimt's results, who are just above them in the coefficient rankings, if Bodo Glimt were to fall and Rangers somehow got an extra point or something, and for the remaining games, they could leapfrog them. See if Rangers win it, they'll go boom, straight in. Direct entry into Champions League, right? The last time it will happen. Can you imagine what they would do with that money? I guarantee you, put the foot down, they kick on. We can't afford that. Now, we've spoken about how guff our seasons are, so I've brought up a couple of previous seasons. Let's have a look. Let's go back to the dreaded COVID season. In that season, this is covering both the windows. Ayeti, Barkas, Turnbull, Duffy, John Joe Kenny, who's a classic, another Kenny that's terrible. No, that's Johnny. That's
Johnny Kenny, yeah.
Laxalt. We had, that's what we brought in. Kouassi came back on loan, and then with nothing else, right? So we get served up that into the next season after that, Paddy. It didn't get any bloody better. Obviously, I've jumped a season. I went over another one and I went to the bad season. But I'm bringing up these names we're talking away because we're talking about how rough things were. There's the last good window or last good season. Kyogo, Starfelt, Abada, Juranovic, Giacomakis, O'Reilly, Hatate, Hart, Idaguchi, as what it is, Scales, Shaw, Uragide, Johnny Kenny, who we've mentioned, McCarthy on a free. Look, these are guys, obviously, Maeda. That's the last good season that we've been served up, and that's still pretty much what is pinning our side here at this moment in time. And then look at the last time, 24-25, it looked good in paper. Engels, Jota, Ida, Trusty, Bernardo, McCowan, Sinisalos, Schmeichel, Schlupp, Vai, Bernabe, Kwon. I mean, come on, man. Are we cruising to another one of these Snyders, mate, where you and I are going to have to come on at the deadline day wear the black suit, the black ties and white shirts on again?
That was hilarious, I must admit. To those of you who don't know, me and Steve will done a transfer deadline day, and Steve will come in with a funeral suit on because it was just basically a absolute shit show of a transfer window. I think we need to be getting in quality, Steve. There's a lot of people here a lot of the names that you mentioned that are, like you said, absolute guff. And we are going to get people who, again, come in and can't live up to the expectation of Celtic. But we want to be bringing in a lot of quality here. We need to be doing it. There's so many positions. I mean, you can basically look at every position in that squad, mate, and you probably need to strengthen it, because we spoke about it before. Last year, we're sitting here going, right, we need like for like. If you're taking off Kyogo, you need a Kyogo to come on. If you're taking off Jota, you need a Jota to come on. And we said about guys like Matt O'Reilly and whatever else, and obviously it was just really, really hard to replace these guys. It was hard to go to your bench. And even now, we're looking at that bench, mate, and you've got, like, we've not got any strikers. We've not got a striker in there, so that is the main thing. You look at right back at the minute, obviously injuries and whatever else, but we don't actually have. We've got Tony Ralston and Kobe Donovan covering at right back. When Alistair Johnson comes back, then you've still got Kobe Donovan or Tony Ralston. They're not the same as an Alistair Johnson.
No.
Do you know what I mean? Callum McGregor, if Callum McGregor goes off, you bring on Luke McCowan. Luke McCowan is not the same player as Callum McGregor. You need to have a like for like, and that's why we see ourselves not progressing in Europe, not progressing going forward, and being an absolute shit show and getting beaten the later stages of games, because we're not bringing on that quality of player. And it's something that if we can identify it, surely they have. Surely they've looked at that and they know where they need to strengthen, mate. We need to get these players in. We need to get them in fast.
And here's the thing, this is why folk are absolutely fuming, right? Just coming back to those transfers, let's have a look at the sort of first, or the 23-24 season, Stephen. Rodgers comes in. Nicholas Kuhn, all right, okay, take it as you find it. Turned out all right, and then he's dipped again. Nawrocki, Palma, Lagerbielke, Odenholm, who I believe is coming back, Yang, Tilio, Kwon, Awata, Nat Phillips on loan. I mean, this is terrible. But again, if we go further back, I don't want to go too far back and labour this point, but we're going to start stating the obvious here that we know. See that 23-24 season period, right? Celtic's overall income was, this is in euros, 46.2 million euros, with an expenditure of 27.46, which gave you a positive in nearly 19 million euros. You then go into that next season, 24-25, that we find ourselves in at the moment, and it's income of 56.18, outgoings a 45.4, and we know we're going to get our pants pulled down for that, which is saying that the overall balance is still plus 11 million euros. There's just 2 seasons. Now, if you wind that all the way back, no wonder folk are annoyed, and no wonder folk are concerned, man.
Well, going back to the list of names that you mentioned, I remember on more than one occasion, Brendan Rodgers came out with kind of veiled statements to say that he didn't really have the final word on a few of those players coming in. So this goes back again to who is it that's doing the business, that identifying these players. Surely you've got to be saying to a manager, okay, if we're bringing somebody in, if we're bringing a Matt O'Reilly in, use Matt O'Reilly as an example. Matt O'Reilly we got for not very, very much money, came here, showed his absolute quality, and then you sell him for a packet. Okay?
Yep.
That's why your kind of transfer financials are so out of sync. You sell Jota for who would have thought we would have got the amount of money for Jota that we eventually got because he went to Saudi. You can't tell me that. But in terms of, as I say, going back to who is it that's identifying these players, we know the Irish connection. We've talked about the Dermot Desmond signings before. James McCarthy was the name that jumped out there. You bring James McCarthy in, there's not one chance in the world that Big Ange, when he came in, went, do you know who's going to make my team better? That boy McCarthy that has only played like 4 times a season over the last 2 years. Not a bloody chance. So again, it goes back to we've got the wrong people doing our scouting, our transfer business. It's not down to the manager, I don't think, whether that's Brendan, Ange, Martin, You can say what you want. You need to go back to getting a proper director of football in who knows the footballing side of things. And that's where, until we do that, we'll never, ever be back to getting a proper, recruitment process where we can look back and say, yes, our transfer business is efficient. Never mind whether we're making money, but it's got to be efficient.
Absolutely broken. To finish up on the squad, I've just got it up in front of me right now. Now, apparently, Celtic's squad is valued at an estimated value. Players only is worth as much football pair, but in euros, 133.5 million euros, right? Sanasalos, Michael, Duan, Vickers, Scales, Trusty, Murray, Inamura, Tierney, Sarachi, Ayero, Johnson, Ralston, Donovan, McGregor, Hatate, Engels, Bernardo, McCowan, Home, Maeda, Jota, Balakwisha, Taneki, Nigrin, Yang, Forrest, Iheanacho, Yamada, Kenny and Osmond. That's possibly got to be up there with one of the worst squads that I've heard or seen in a long, long time. So with that in mind, with what we've got, all those injuries, nothing there, we face a massive game, a chance for redemption tomorrow, Paddy, against the D United, the homecoming of St. Martin. Just ever so briefly, how's this one going to pan out, mate? Can we get a resurrection of this terrible squad to just get by until we manage to maybe get some players in the door?
I think the players will have a wee bounce, the old new manager bounce, Steve-o, although it's an old manager, but with Wilfred Nancy gone and bringing in a formation that the players are quite happy to play, then I would be looking for a result here. I know when previously asked when Nancy was in charge, I wasn't confident at all, but going into this, I'm quietly confident, shall we say. You know, I never do anything quietly, but I'd be hoping for about 2-0, 2-1.
Yeah,
it's
a chance to right some wrongs, mate.
Yeah.
That stinking second half they served up against Dundee United, an exercise in capitulation. These guys have got a chance to make amends and, apologise to ourselves. Let's be honest. I think we know that Nancy was a fool, Stephen, but they didn't do him any favours. They didn't do us any favours. And actually, one of my friends says that he thought that the players in that 8-game period, despite being out of sorts, were a collective disgrace. Do you see us picking it back up? Is this the first day of the rest of our lives tomorrow, mate?
Yeah, for me, tomorrow is the first day of the season as far as I'm concerned. We've got Martin back. We're at home, so we've got a couple of things that put it slightly more in our favour. I mentioned, as I say, the photographs from training at Lennoxtown today, where the overall, I'm one for talking about players' body language and stuff like that. I'm not an expert, but I can tell when a guy's unhappy, and I can also tell when a guy has got that wee bit of extra, stuff. We mentioned Martin's qualities as about giving players that extra bit of self-confidence in themselves. So, I think being positive, we will go tomorrow. I don't see it being a huge victory because we're still shy of a striker, somebody that's going to score us those goals. But for me, the most important thing tomorrow is 3 points. Get the first win under our belts, and then build a bit of momentum, because we're only a couple of weeks away from I think when our next game against Hearts is. So we need to make sure that we're keeping the pressure on them. We're right over their shoulder. They'll be looking back, and as the games progress, they'll be there'll be more pressure on them, while we again under Martin can hopefully get this momentum going and back to winning ways. So definitely, as I say, most important thing for me tomorrow is 3 points.
Absolutely. I'm going to pin my cause to the mast and say, yep, I think that there's going to be a Celtic win. There's going to be a bounce. Of course, there's going to be a bounce. I agree fully with what you're saying. I watched that 7-minute or whatever training video, and it was great to see smiles on the faces. It was good to hear a noisy training ground, lots of shouting, lots of communication, completely different from the strange videos that we got under Nancy, where it was all very quiet and it didn't look together. I'll say I'm happy to see it, but it was also a wee bit sort of disappointing to see that, that you weren't getting that same sort of buy-in, because, yep, they might have down tools, as some folks said, but at the end of the day, they are partly contributed. The big problem was Nonce. He didn't do himself any favours, but the players certainly didn't do him any either. But no, I think we'll get the bounce. I think we'll get the win. I think it'll be a comfortable win. I'm going to say 2-0, but nothing massive. It might be a wee bit of grind at points, but it's just about getting points on the board. That's the most important thing. And then we can worry about everything else from there on. So I just want to say thanks to everybody for taking the time to join us. This is a wee quick pop-up. Everybody's got some stuff on. I don't know if it's snowing out your way. It's certainly snowing out where I am. And hopefully that's it. And do you know what? I hope the game goes on tomorrow. Don't worry, it's snowed off. Shouldn't have no reason for it to be snowed off, that's for sure. But no, we need to get back in the stadium. We need to get the energy. We need to get behind the team. Hopefully further down the line, there's been the collective statement. They're asking, Mackay's coming out. He's asking for unity. Well, it's only words if you don't want to get around the table and try and do it. Because right now, we need every single wee ounce sort of extra in the tank that we can get. Every wee tiny positive that we can get is what we need in this real time of uncertainty and a time of fragility. Paddy, you're not all in for it tomorrow, mate?
I'm buzzing for it, mate. I'm excited to see the return of Martin and the tracksuit and stuff like that. I really am. Let's have a nice performance, a good positive result. We could do a bit of positivity, couldn't we? It's been a bit of a shit show the last wee while. It's been tough, so we need a proper Celtic performance here. We need something really, really good. Listen, Dan the man in the chat there. Listen, I seen you gifting out more memberships, mate. Absolute legend. I really appreciate it. Contact me on TikTok or send us a wee message and I'll send you something signed, mate, by one of the ex-players that we've had on. I really appreciate all the support, man. What a legend.
No worries. Grant, thank you very much. Listen, as it says, game tomorrow. Let's focus on it. Get the points on the board. If you're attending, let's get behind the team. Let's drive this team forward. St. Martin's back. Hopefully we'll see a return to at least winning ways. How the results come, it doesn't matter. And again, maybe we'll get beyond all this rumours and we'll see some of that action. 9 days into the transfer window, plenty of work needing done. We say that all the time, a Celtic transfer window, but we can still live in hope because at least better times surely have got to be around the corner. So until the next time, take care of yourselves. And as always, Paddy boy,
hail, hail, guys.